Hello everyone, this is Dr. Home and I'm Reverend Lang. Welcome to Pandamix, Healing Conversations and Practices for In-Between Times. This is episode 4, Telling Stories to Heal. Telling Stories to Heal.
So in the last couple of episodes, we've been exploring how the suppression of feelings and the suppression and the forgetting of our life stories is what actually make us disconnect with ourselves and disconnect with each other. So in this episode, we're going to dive further into how to tell stories and what kind of stories do we share with each other and how to create safe space, courageous space for these stories to be heard.
Right.
And how do we heal ourselves?
So this is going to be a bit of a how-to session as well. But the framing for telling stories, one way to look at that is, for folks of an intellectual bent, you might want to look at Iron John by Robert Bly. And in that book, Robert Bly draws upon the story of the Fisher King and Parsifal. We don't know its origins. It came about somewhere in the 12th century in what we will now call Europe. And the story of the Fisher King and Parsifal is that Parsifal was a young boy, and he left his mother's home in homespun clothing. And this is a mythical story, right, where we're looking for symbolic value. And he goes on an adventure, and at some point he ends up in the castle of the Fisher King. And something is wrong with the Fisher King, something is wrong with the kingdom. You know, it's depressed, it's sick. He meets the Fisher King, and they end up having a chat, what we would call a chat. In other words, there was a conversation, but nothing happened. Because, you see, Parsifal doesn't know what that conversation is supposed to be. So he leaves again, and he goes on further adventures, and he meets the Black Knight, and a Red Knight, and a White Knight. And, Robert Bly has a really wonderful interpretation of what that means for the psyche of a young male, but you could also say it's the psyche of any young person. I think it could apply to women. And then what happens is he comes back now older and wiser. He's been formed by his experiences. In other words, the metaphor is he's now ready to re-encounter the Fisher King, and he meets the Fisher King. And now the question that he knows how to ask is, where are you wounded? No, where are you wounded? We might say, where's the hurt? I mean, that's something psychotherapists these days will ask, where's the hurt? In fact, good parenting would also ask the same question. If a child falls down, you didn't say, what happened? Why didn't you watch, where you were going? You actually would ask, where is the hurt?
I mean, this is part of my training when I was going through training working with people who have experienced trauma. And one of the facilitators asked us, when a child running towards you crying, what is the first thing to ask the child? Mm-hmm. And many people usually would say, what's wrong with you?
Oh, what happened?
Or what's the matter? Mm-hmm. Or stop crying.
Yes.
Or if you cry, I'm going to beat you up even more. This is how we raise our children, by stopping them from acknowledging where the pain is. And so what I'm hearing in the story is, where does it hurt? Where is the pain? Where is the wound? And what is the experience of that wound?
So where? And it's not even what is the hurt, was the question Parsifal asked the Fisher King. Where is the hurt? and the hurt was in the Fisher King's upper thigh. Now that's often a metaphor for having been wounded in the genitals. Something has happened to the Fisher King in the genitals, where the generative part of life lies. Now the answer, it's not so important. The important part is that as soon as Parsifal is able to ask the Fisher King, where is the hurt, and the Fisher King shows that wounding, then the kingdom heals. The interpretation...
So this is not literal, this is metaphorical.
It's metaphorical, right? And the answer is not important anymore. It's asking the question and being shown the wound. And Bly's interpretation, if I recall, is he says, this is the psyche of the younger male asking where the masculine wounding is, and then the conversation that takes place. In other words, it's the internal conversation that takes place within us, between our younger self and our present self, or between our present self and the forgotten older self. I mean, you could get metaphorical and Jungian and spiritual about it.
What I also see in that is the young man asking the king, which is asking the father.
You could say asking the father figure,
like
the literal father figures in our lives.
Like imagine if we were to go to our fathers and ask, where's the hurt?
Where is the hurt?
Dad, where's the hurt?
Dad, where is the hurt? Dad, where is the hurt? Where is the hurt? And so we can play this out literally, as in asking our fathers, now that we are older. Sometimes it's been really quite amazing when a younger man has asked us, where is the hurt? So here we are containing this as a meant to man or men's talk. It would be very interesting for women to explore this, who are listening in, to explore this question as well. Does this work?
What I imagine, and again, this is a very big generalization here, many women, when they are girls, they do tell stories. They do tend to each other by listening to boys' stories, and they cry together, and they laugh together, and they giggle together. But boys, they don't do that. Boys get together and say, well, who's we gonna...
Well, wait, this is a scoring conversation.
Yeah,
the
who's
boys
gonna
have.
f next?
Yes.
By the way, this is...
Why am I cringing?
Yeah, you've been taught not to use that word. Well, I'm using that word just for effect here. And this is meant for adults to listen. So keep going.
So the question about where is the hurt is the question we are exploring in our personal lives. Is the question we are also asking as a culture. Because we go back to our original intention for starting this, is to say that something is really hurting in world culture in these in-between times, and then specifically a lot of hurts in American culture and in the male psyche and in the white male psyche that we have had the opportunity and honor to observe. So these are our conversations. So where is the hurt? And I think by telling our individual stories, the stories within the family, we get to sort of see what's going on. So I have a story to tell of having explored this, but you also have some questions to help people ask the stories. You want to go with that first?
Yeah. So of my background, I spent years gathering people.
When you were in your 20s?
In my 20s, even in my 30s. First gathering refugees, Vietnamese refugees, to share stories. And through that experience, I have experienced healing myself and so many people.
Yes.
And then in our 30s, this is right in the middle of the AIDS epidemic.
Yeah.
Kind of similar to what's happening now with COVID. In some ways, even worse, because at that time there was so much shame put on gay men.
Yeah.
And so
Shame and terror.
terror.
The utter terror
Yep.
that you might die and die rejected by everybody.
Yep.
Yep.
And so we gather in small groups to have these storytelling circles. What it's like to come out. What is it like to have the life experience that you have?
Yeah.
Right? So these are some tips. How to create this environment where people feel safe and feel courageous to tell stories. Well, first of all, you have to be willing to show up to one of these storytelling experiences. Show up for yourself. Right? I'm ready and willing to explore stories that I don't even know how to tell.
Yeah.
I have some stories, but no one have heard this, and I need a witness. I need someone to listen to me. Now, I have a teacher who said the process of being listened to and being witnessed, the person who being witnessed and listened to, they are transformed, they are healed through that process. I mean, that's what therapist does. The person who's doing the listening and the witnessing also experience a kind of healing because through empathy and through compassion. Yeah.
And being trusted.
Yes. And then there's through that process we also find our shared humanities. Okay. So first of all, things you don't do. Okay, let's talk about what we don't do when we get together and share stories. And I would say when white men get together and share stories, don't do these things. For all men, but particularly white men. Don't fix each other. Don't go into problem solving. You should be doing this. You shouldn't be doing that. No, Don't fix each other. Don't rationalize. Don't try to solve the problem. There's no problem to solve except right there and then to simply listen. Breathe and be present. Now, of course, sometimes somebody's stories trigger some feelings and some thoughts. Now, this is where you learn how to be with your own feelings, your own sadness, your own fear, your own anger as you listen. How to be present to another person. You breathe along, you feel your feet on the ground. Also, don't try to explain or psychologize yourself. I see this with a lot of young people who they read pop psychology and then they go in there and they psychologize themselves. Oh yeah, then this is why I behave like this and this. No, not about why you behave. Just the actual experience where it hurts. So please take a breath with me. A few things we can do together when we get together to share stories. We breathe. We look into each other's eyes. We acknowledge with each other where the pains are.
And what is acknowledgement? Can you say a bit? What is it? What's the actual practice of acknowledging?
After someone shares their stories, you say, what I heard from you is. And you simply reflect exactly what you heard. I heard you say this and this and this, and this happened to you, and this is where it hurts. You reflect back.
Without commentary, without adding your own commentary.
As much as possible, many of us often just lay our stuff on top of it, like, oh, well, when I heard that story, well, this happened to me too, and blah, blah, blah. You just like hijack someone's story. That's not the time to do it. This is what I heard. So it takes discipline, it takes care to listen. Now, this requires some training, and this is part of what we're doing here. Yeah, please take another breath with me. So then, what kind of questions? Where to begin?
Just before that, how to empathize?
Yes.
How to, because we feel we want to empathize, and usually we empathize by saying, well, that's me too. I think one way to empathize is to, if you're able to say it, when you said, for example, my dad divorced my mom. And then you can say, I felt, okay. And then you can claim your feeling. I felt sad. I felt embarrassed. I felt just a tightness in my throat. Okay. Yeah. And this is a way to say to someone, to witness someone, and then to let them know you had this experience. But this is not the time to, again, problem solve and say, yeah, when I heard you say your dad divorced your mom, I thought,
you shouldn't
you
feel
should
like
have felt this or done that, or how awful for you, or not commentary. How awful for you is not, that's conventional talk. Speak about how it landed for you, like my throat constricted.
Or something possible to say when I heard you say that, I imagine that it's really upsetting for you.
Yes.
Right? You tune into what might be the other person's feelings.
Yeah. I mean, the rule of thumb is keep it short and sincere. Because the attention is for the person who's telling the story, not really you so much.
So when we get together, where to begin? What kind of questions to begin? So I would suggest don't go to the deep end and ask, well, what is your relationship with your father like? Or what did your father do to you? We don't go there right away. We start with something very simple, like, what are some of your favorite memories of food? What songs did you grow up singing?
As a child.
What games do you guys play? Who were your best friend and what that person was like? What your favorite ice cream might be, right? Share those, and then just first to practice listening to the simple stories. And this is when you begin to build trust with each other. When I talk, this person really knows how to listen to me. This person is not trying to solve my problem. This person doesn't try to fix me. This person is really present to me as I tell these simple stories. And then together, you go deeper. Perhaps a question like, what was a moment when you realized your father or your mother, they are not what they seem to be. The moment when they felt like you put them in the pedestal, and then you discover, wow, they are imperfect, flawed human beings. What was that experience like? Usually that is a terrible heartbreak in that moment. Like for me, the moment I realized my father was a flawed human being. The moment I found out he had a girlfriend. And he was supposed to be this perfect father to protect my family, save us, rescue us, take us to America. And how could he get to America and had a girlfriend? I mean, I remember sitting in the car with him when he told me this, and I literally thought, I'm going to open the door of the car and jump out. I was so devastated. So that moment. So please take a breath with me.
Yeah. These can be very beautiful questions to share. The one I like is, what were your imaginary friends as a childhood, in your childhood? So the difference, so what really is the story? And one of my colleagues in the coaching world said something like, if you say the king died and the queen died, and that's not a story. But if you say the king died and the queen died of heartbreak, then that's a story. So emotions
there's a feeling there.
Becomes very important. And it's not like the queen died because the king died of a political assassination. That's still not a story. That's just more facts, right? But when she died of a heartbreak, that's important. So I just want to sort of end with a story of myself. One of the things about coming out as a gay Asian man in the 80s is actually how much the difficulty it was thinking that, that I might not have a family of my own. And because my parents were evangelical Christians, there was already a sense of being rejected and exiled. And so the whole question is, what is family and who is family? And I had the intuition to interview my paternal grandmother, who was illiterate and didn't speak Mandarin, spoke a Chinese dialect. And I just sort of asked her, so who was your mother? And she ended up telling the story of having my great-grandmother had adopted her. And I said to my granny, I said, so great-granny wasn't your mother? And she scolded me. She said, no, I ate her food. She is my mother. So I learned something about how she felt when she got upset with me. But what it turned out was that she had been adopted by my great-grandmother. So then I got curious about the rest of my granduncles and grandaunt, and I said, what about granduncle? And she said, oh, I bought him. I said, you bought him?
This is in China.
No, this was in Singapore. They'd all emigrated out to Singapore. She said, I wanted a doll to hug. And this boy was being sold. Now, what it meant in the old days was it was likely a poor family that was willing to have someone adopt their child. And the sale was a little kind of a gratuity where you would give in exchange to honor the fact that you were receiving this life. So it was given a little red packet or something. So they called it a sale to kind of formalize this handover and this exchange. So she said, yeah, I bought him off the streets.
This is
being given away.
Her son.
No, her brother, my granduncle. Wow. So she bought her brother, my granduncle. And as it turns out, another one was also adopted, and there was only one real biological one that came later. So I had the sense that they were adopted, and they had bought each other, and they had essentially, it was essentially a queer family before the word queer has now become kind of mainstream. In other words, it was odd, it didn't follow the rules, it certainly wasn't biological, that most Asians think of what families have to be.
They have chosen each other.
They have chosen each other. It was based out of need and affection, and then it ended up becoming a family that had loyalty, dedication, commitment. Because as she said, no, she is my mother. I ate her food. Literally, I ate her saliva. And so that was so encouraging for me, because I went away with this sense of, I have a role model, and the role model is not a white role model, not a Western role model. This is from my own family.
And not the nucleus.
It was not a nuclear family, not biological, and this was from my grandmother. And here is a resource in my mind for resiliency, for resilience, that is mine, and that has come out of my lineage.
And this was a secret to you, like your father didn't tell you this, you went and asked your grandmother.
We had known there was adoption, but that was it. And certainly not that his uncle had been bought and adopted. So I was able to go to my father and say, did you know this was happening? And they went, oh yeah, I think so. That's kind of what happened. And even to today, when we go back to looking at these photographs, we're still trying to figure out now the emotional dynamics and the meaning of this. So some of his first cousins, that I call aunties, were also adopted and were sold. and of course you work through the shame and the embarrassment of what that means. The gift for me was there was care and caring in the midst of poverty. And you know, I have other stories of other parts of the family. It really launched me to becoming the scribe for family stories.
Let's take a breath together. So in this session so far, I just want to underline a few things before we complete. The importance of asking questions. And a very powerful and simple question is, where does it hurt? Where is the wound? And we also talk about how to get together and share stories. We talk about creating a courageous and safe space where people don't feel like when they talk, they'll get fixed. They get problem need to be solved, right? So creating that space, and what kind of questions, how to begin to have these conversations with each other, what kind of presencing, you know, how do I show up, how do I listen, how do I reflect, how do I empathize, and then how do we go deeper? So what else do you think is important to acknowledge, the takeaway here?
The other part is make it fun, make it sincere. We have asked many of our clients to do that, and allow yourself to be surprised.
Be curious and surprised.
Curious what there are strange jewels to be found in our family. And we encourage you to go interview your parents, grandparents if they are around, siblings, including siblings that you might have had difficulties with. Just set up a conscious, intentional time to say, hey, I have this project that I'm doing. And even tape it, because that's what I did with my grandmother, and I could hear her voice.
And even if you're not ready for any of those, you can also work with a therapist.
Yes.
Who has a trained skill to listen to these types of stories and help you go deeper.
Or just start writing your own. Start writing your own stories. Start writing the stories of the first 7 years of your life and the next 7 years of your life, and what happened. Just even put it down there. And if you're already a grown man with children, one way to think about it is then tell the story for your son and your daughter to hear, if you were to die today, or a grown woman.
Let's take another breath. In the next, where I would like to go next is to see how these personal healing work impact family system, impact society.
And workplace.
So please take a breath. We're looking forward to seeing you again next time.